Rabbi Dan Selsberg of Beth Jacob Synagogue here in Hamilton. Welcome to Mitzvah Tube. As we come up on Passover, we get to focus on one of the fun parts of the Seder meal, which is getting to sing Dayyeinu. Even people who have never been to a Seder before, by the time you get to the end of the first verse, maybe the second verse, already have caught on, are singing along to Dayyeinu. Sometimes people are already complaining about singing Dayyeinu by the time you get to the end of the first or the second verse. Sometimes it's the same person. Sometimes it's me. There's often some wiseacre at the table, again sometimes it's me, who points out that the song doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. Say, Ilo Tzianu mi Mitzrayim, v'lo asa behem sfatim Dayyeinu. If you brought us out of Egypt, but hadn't done all these other things, then Dayyeinu, it would have been enough. If you brought us out of Egypt, but hadn't split the sea for us, Dayyeinu, it would have been enough. But would have been enough if God brought us out of Egypt and let the Egyptian army chase us down and didn't split the sea. Not Dayyeinu. We would have been slaughtered on the shore of the sea by the Egyptian army. It wouldn't have been enough. Or if you had led us across the water but hadn't split the sea, led us across the water but hadn't had the water crash down and destroy our enemies, Dayyeinu, it would have been enough. Would have been enough? Not Dayyeinu. If he let the Egyptians cross the sea right after us, they would have slaughtered us on the other side of the sea, so it wouldn't have been enough. If you had destroyed our enemies in the sea, but hadn't fed us for 40 years in the desert, Dayyeinu. Not Dayyeinu. It wouldn't have been enough. We would have starved in the desert had we not been fed. So you have to wonder what's going on with Dayyeinu, outside of the melody, that we say it at all, because it seems that it's patently not true. It would not have been enough if God had given us partial redemption and not the complete package. One way to think about what's going on is the history of the song. For the history, I refer to the Shechter Haggadah by Professor Joshua Kulp, which is a wonderful Haggadah. And he gives a couple of theories as to how this song came about. He says, some people say that it comes from the Second Temple period about 2,000 years ago. This is linked through the word ma'alot, the introduction to Dayyeinu's Kama ma'alot tavot makom aleinu. How many wonderful steps God did for us. And the ma'alot also refers to the steps in the temple, leading up to the temple are called ma'alot, and the Psalms refers to the shirei ma'alot, what the Levites would sing in the temple. Some say that that links it to the time of the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, 2,000 years ago. The problem with that is that we don't find Dayyeinu written in any Haggadah until about the 9th or 10th century. So in Saadia Gaon's Haggadah. So it's unlikely that it lived for 1,000 years before it shows up in the historical record. It's possible, but unlikely. Other people think that Dayyeinu is a response to Christian polemic. Christians would polemicize at Easter time, at Passover time, that Jews were famously an ungrateful people. They were ungrateful when Jesus came, and they were ungrateful even in their own holy books, even in the Torah. When God and Moses do so many wonderful things for Israel, the Israelites are historically ungrateful, and you don't have to spend too much time reading the Torah to see that that, in fact, is true. The Israelites show an almost pathological need to complain for all of the things that God and Moses are doing on their behalf. But it seems unlikely that we would include an anti-Christian polemic or a response to Christian polemic in the Haggadah. It doesn't seem like that's exactly the space for it. But I think they're getting onto something there, that the core message of it is a message of gratefulness, that whatever God does for us, whether it's a full redemption or a partial redemption, Dayyeinu, it would be enough, that we're grateful for any gift that we get, that we're grateful for any small thing. We can't change the past. We can't go back and make our ancestors more grateful than they were, but we can act with gratitude in our lives, and that's why we sing Dayyeinu, that if we get any little thing, we're grateful for it. And that's the first part of Dayyeinu. The second part is that it would be enough if God just reveals God's self for one moment, because the message of the Exodus, the message of God's revelation is one, that Pharaoh cannot stand, and that Pharaoh's regime cannot stand, not in the literal governmental sense, but in the sense that when you hold a slave, the message of slavery is that one person is expendable and can be replaced with the next. That any one person is just a cog in a machine. and that people are just there to make this machine run, and that they're not significant in and of themselves as individuals, and that's what the Exodus comes to counter. The Exodus comes to tell us that we are not cogs in a machine, and we must not treat people as if they were cogs in a machine. Rather, every person is worthy of dignity and worthy of being treated as if they are created in the image of God. And you see this as a risk, not just in Pharaoh's time, but in our time as well, because we see it in things here in Hamilton. There was just this week trafficking in a human trafficking, sentencing in a human trafficking case. People still treat other people as cogs in a machine or as not fully worthy of human dignity. You find it in common societal structures, on factory floors where people are treated as cogs, in social structures and social programs where people are treated just as names on a list and not the human beings that those names represent. We're all at risk of doing this. Formally and informally, we do it when we confuse a checkout clerk for the checkout machine. We do it when we confuse the person on the other end of the phone line, when we call for help on some issue, as if they were a computer on the other end of the line, as if being in a Southeast Asian call center somehow makes you less human than if you're in a call center that's close to home. And we see it even athletes who get pumped full of steroids and drugs so that they can perform on command, rather than allowing the body the rest and the respite that it needs. All of these things indicate that in our age, we are at risk of treating people as cogs, as less than human. All of this is what Buber would call an I-it relationship, not an I-thou relationship. An I-it relationship is when we treat another human being as if they're a thing, not as a full human being, not as worthy of the dignity. An I-thou relationship is when we treat somebody else as if they are worthy of all the dignity and they have all the complexity that we want to be treated with, or that we want our loved ones to be treated with. And that's Dayyeinu. If we recognize that each of us is worthy of human dignity and that we're not to be treated as just cogs in a machine, that's the message of the Exodus. That, if we get nothing more than that, Dayyeinu, that's enough. If we can get on Seder night, throughout Passover, and more importantly throughout the year, that we're supposed to treat each other as if we're all worthy of respect, as if we all merit to live with dignity, and as if we all merit to be treated as B'Tselem Elohim, as created in the image of God. And if we get that, and if our actions reflect that we get that, then Dayyeinu, then what God did for us was enough, because we can act towards each other with decency, and if we can do that, Dayyeinu, that's enough. Chag sameach, a happy and kosher Passover.